We're on. Hi, everybody. This is Raghu Markus, and I'm the director of Love Serve Remember Foundation. And of course, we have ramdas.org and BeHereNowNetwork.com as part of it. And welcome to our Life in Balance, our first Q&A. We just started this a few days ago, and it's you know what's been really terrific is everybody on that Facebook group, which you can access on the invitation that you get every day. There are some wonderful stories and anecdotes and references to the day's subject. It's highly recommend. I've been having fun going on it myself. So I see we're all still starting to gather here, but we're going to go ahead and start because we're recording this, which is what we told everybody. So always a difficulty to get in exactly at the appointed time. So I wanted to say a little bit about how we came to present this course, and it really, it of course emanates from the Be Here Now Network podcasts with all of these amazing teachers that we have on the network. Jack Kornfield, Ram Dass, Krishna Das, Joseph Goldstein, Lama Surya Das, Sharon Salzberg. I mean, these are, and many more. Dale Borglum. And from time to time we have the likes of Roshi Joan Halifax, who's just such a super insightful, wise teacher. So in the process of chatting with these people, which I've done on the Mindrolling podcast, so a lot of the excerpts that you get day to day come from there. How it happened is, and today's, what's on today is probably the best example, but I'm going to get to that in a minute, the Krishna Das excerpt. So what happened is just, I would chat with these teachers, and then next thing you know, they would say this amazing thing, and I'd like, oh, wow, you know, and it would stick with me for the day. And it really made me contemplate the breadth of what they were giving in that moment. And it was a nugget. It was like, you know, it could be in a minute, 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, because of the nature of a podcast. It's not a talk over an hour or 2 hour period. So I thought, wow, I'd love to share this because that's my thing. That's what I've been doing since I first got back from India, actually, which is a whole other story. But what I wanted to do, or what I felt was really useful, was having these beautiful wisdom nuggets, I like to call them, from all of these teachers. And we found a way that what these teachers represented really great advice on how to keep your life in balance. So that's where the idea came from. And then and the execution of it was based on the fact that I thought, if you had one, almost like a mantra, something that went inside you and you could, it acted on its own throughout your day as you related with other people, with events, with circumstances, suddenly there could be the creation of a new perspective that you could see your life through, a new vantage point, and really get an idea around who we really are, our identity, and how we've related with ourselves over the years, from birth till however old you are. So that was the idea. So also, obviously, we thought the fact that people's time is limited during the day and in the evening, and we thought this really was a way to jump start your day to just give you that kind of inspiration. And I guess the biggest example is when I did this chat with Krishnadas, from which the segment that was sent today, that's our teaching of today, fourth day, is around practice. And I asked him what it is, why did he feel it was important, and the kind of the way in which it could impact a life. And I think, I'm hoping whoever's on this call at this point is familiar with it. And to me, the most important thing, and I said this in the video that I did for the actual course, the most important ingredient in taking the first step forward on a path to better balance on the spiritual path, however which way you want to, whatever way you want to call it, is to understand that there is a way in which we identify with that which engenders suffering. And of course, I'm talking about our self-interest day to day to day, our self, the little self, our thoughts, our emotions, and so on. And that's why Ram Dass has always said one of the first practices of real importance is absolutely necessary is the practice of the witness. And we've been talking about that as well. And some people said some great things on Facebook about it. And I want to recommend right now what I already did recommend was watching as an adjunct to this course, Cultivating Loving Awareness from Ram Dass, Sharon Salzberg, and Krishna Das, and others. I think that's going to be entirely helpful, because once we realize that we do want to create a witness so that we can watch the ways in which we identify with our roles, with our thoughts, with everything, as we discussed. But how do you leverage yourself from not being completely glued to your thoughts? And I think I said this in a Facebook post the other day as well. When people ask me, what have I gotten out of decades of practice and of being with this incredible being, Neem Karoli Baba? And the first thing out of my mouth is always, I just don't, my thoughts I do not stick with my thoughts. So I'm not identifying with my thoughts in any way as strongly as I used to. That has evolved over time. And as a result, there's a general diffusion of my reaction. It's just not got the grip that it used to have. So developing that witness, moving into a place of loving awareness from which you see your day-to-day life is extraordinarily important. And the way to do that is practice, and that's what Krishnadas is talking about today. And we need to have an opportunity to reverse the identity that we have on had on a day-to-day basis, which is so easy to fall into because we're reacting. Okay, I think that's enough of a prologue to this. We do have some questions that were emailed in. Let's see. This is a good question that's not necessarily directly pointed to what we've been discussing in the course, but it really is, I think, something important especially because the people, all of these teachers and myself, we are taking these teachings, obviously, from a deep resource in the East. And so this question is, I love the stories that Raghu and Ram Dass and all the other speakers relate about their time in India and the esoteric approach to spirituality. But if it's all form and just another path to the top, does it make sense for Westerners to dive into that culture? Our work is here and now in our lives, and for most of us, that work and family is our day-to-day reality. I'm paraphrasing a little bit because there's some words missing in the end. So I do think it's really important right off to say this has nothing to do with becoming a Hindu, Buddhist, or anything like that. Absolutely not. One does not have to go to India. Those people that you're talking about, yes, we did go to India, and it was our destiny, karma, to have that happen. And but in today's age, with what's available to us through electronic media, the internet, and so on, boy, I mean, it's kind of amazing. If somebody would want to go over there, fabulous. I mean, it's an incredible place, India in particular. And there still are beings over there that are very, very special. Many great teachers as well. So, but it's not necessary. But what is interesting is that what we brought back were practices that absolutely can open ourselves to a deeper understanding and connection with who we truly are. And that's the practices that we represent, that's represented by Ram Dass and what we do at ramdass.org. Of course, Be Here Now Network with all these teachers. Obviously, different traditions in Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, and Southern Buddhist teachings. And of course, Bhakti path. Those three streams would be what we represent from our time in the East. Within those streams, I should say, to me, common sense application of mindfulness practice, for instance, of the opening the heart practices that Krishnadas represents through his chant practice. These are practical, to me, practical solutions when someone says, how do I even start to think about how I'm going to get my life straightened out? Or I'm not constantly caught in suffering or in addiction or in obsessions about one part of my life, about worry, just general day to day. It's practice. And these practices that were brought back, I think, really speak to speak as antidotes rather, for some of what ails us. See, so that's question one. Let's see. Well, there's two questions here. They also don't relate directly to the course necessarily, but I think they're important. Just as I think, the thought of having to adopt Hindu isms or Buddhism is, it's important, of course, to realize that's not the case. But this is about being committed to the path, but conflicted and overwhelmed by which path to take, who to follow as my spiritual teacher. And the second question is about how can you tell between healthy spiritual teachers and ones that may not have exactly the right intention, but claim to have them, which is entirely common. Boy, they come out over here to America in droves, people. And some of them are good teachers, but it's not the same as what in India in Hinduism is called Satguru, the true guru, which is rare. And you don't look for that. They pick you. You don't go looking for that. What you look for is, and this is in terms of what path to take, certain things are going to resonate with you. You hear Krishna, we're talking about Krishnadas because he's today's teaching. But, you know, I don't know how many people have heard, they were in a bookstore, or they were heard on the radio, Krishnadas, and it rang a bell, and they went to find out about Krishnadas. Where does he come from? And so on and so forth. And then some of them find Ramdas, and they find out about that, and it just resonates. That's what you're going on, that intuition and trust. Intuition and trust are two other extraordinarily important assets to cultivate, for sure. And everyone, you know, and other people, it may be a path of knowledge. And for me, for instance, I love studying or reading and taking in Tibetan texts. I love the Tibetan teachers. I loved Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, for instance. And in fact, there's a wonderful podcast that I found that's on Ramdas Here and Now podcast on Be Here Now Network, just up right now. It's a panel with Chogyam Trungpa and Ramdas and a couple other people. It's about the notion of ego. Boy, does it fit into this course. That should be homework. Go watch the notion of ego with Chogyam Trungpa. You watch it because it's a video. It's amazing, aside from being an audio podcast. So, you know, that was my thing, and I just felt comfortable there, and it felt good. Obviously, my main practice has been through meeting Neem Karoli Baba, meeting Maharaji. It's Bhakti Yoga. It's the yoga of devotion. It's the yoga of love. And chanting is a huge part of that. So this is stuff what Krishnadas does now. We used to do together in the 70s, just in our home, 70s and 80s, just in our home. There was no, he only went public with this in 1994 or something. So that combination is very appealing to me. So you resonate with something. You resonate with what feels good intuitively, and then you learn how to trust that. You allow that trust to grow, and then you know, search for teachers based on the particular path that you're interested in, and you'll find them. And that's the beauty of the internet right now. So that, to me, is the best way. And who to follow as a spiritual teacher? Again, you have to differentiate a teacher with a quote unquote the real thing, you know, a guru who's not a teacher, who is the way. I mean, the amazing thing about Maharaji was like seeing a being. I mean, when I first met him, it was like I couldn't find an ego place. I mean, I was like, oh my God, he's like this is just to happen. Whatever's happening is just happening. He's like sort of like a computer. You put in thing and it comes back with, our friend calls Google Guru. So it's a little like that. So when you realize the reality that this is who we are in our deepest place, then you start to have some real hope, and you develop trust, and you develop faith, and your perspective change. And that's a lot of what I keep insisting with people, is to realize, you know, is identity and perspective. That's why that's the first part of this Life and Balance course. Okay, what's next? Okay, there's somebody in the peanut gallery here that's named Rachel, who has a couple of questions.
I'll just read them in order.
Well, you're too far away, so I'm going to read them.
Okay.
You want to give them to me?
I texted them to you.
Oh, you did? Okay, is that it? Rahim?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's the first one. There are 3.
Okay. There are 3. Oh my. For people, is that, oh no, if one is living in the West, wishes to become an authentic yogi and experience yoga as a way of living, should one take a course in the West or travel East India? That's very similar, of course, to what I just addressed when somebody asked about the first question, the 2 questions ago, about having to go, that we had all this time in India, so do you have to go to India? And my answer is always no, you do not have to do that, especially in the day and age that we live in. On the other hand, obviously India is where yoga originated, and you're talking of not just hatha yoga, physical yoga. You're talking about the yoga, all of the yogas, bhakti yoga, gyan yoga, etc. Eight-limbed yoga. Sometimes it is absolutely right for somebody to go to the East and do a retreat. It's right. I think we all need to do retreats, and I've been doing them in India every year for many, many, many years because I have family there from my time back then and all that. But I think it's important to do some sort of retreat every year, and India certainly would be one that I'd highly recommend. There, I don't know about a course there. I think just absorbing what's there, if you obviously are led to the right places. And yeah, and anybody who's watching now or later, we're happy. You can write to the Be Here Now. Where should they write? info@ramdas.org. info@ramdas.org. And if you have a thought to go to India, we'll make some recommendations, okay? Kathy, do you have recommendations on how to stay in witness mode when in hectic, dynamic situations? I thought of using a mantra, but not sure how to develop one that holds a deep meaning for me. Well, that's very difficult, isn't it? We all know that one. I know it quite well myself. To me, the most efficacious method when you're in a dramatic moment, when it's either an emergency or someone has really ticked you off, or a situation, or you've just gotten bad, there's so many ways in which you can immediately tighten up and witness. I mean, there's no even a distant thought about a witness, there's reaction. So really what the first step is to cut into the reaction and taking the pause breath, it's called. Just, if the only thing you need to remember is the breath, like as soon as that tension happens, try and take a deep breath, and then take 3. And then as you take in each breath, just focus in the center of your chest. And when you realize that you're gravitating to the fear or whatever it may be, suffering or whatever it is, take another breath and focus in the center of your chest. That is my own personal advice for myself. That is the only way I have managed to just be able to step back into just a little corner of the witness. And especially moving into the center of your chest, because you're moving out of your mind judgment stuff. And that's extraordinarily important as well. So yeah, the pause breath. Where is that? On the Be Here, no, what's our app called? Heart Mind app. On our Heart Mind app, which is part of the Be Here Now network, is some meditations. Here's another piece of homework. I did a pause meditation on that app. Part of you can just scroll through it, you'll find it. That's a good thing. You can use that. It's a good reminder of how to deal with these, as you call them, dynamic situations. Thanks, Kathy. That's a great question. And this is from Chris, our friend Chris Trouet. My question is related to getting past the fear of being alone with my thoughts. I read and listen to teachings regularly, but I'm so into this world. How does one get past the fear of the quiet? Well, first of all, better stop watching the news. A lot of us should stop watching the news, huh? And I don't mean about checking out. I just mean about the obsession that we are going through these days watching the news. Fear of being alone with thoughts. Well, I think, this goes back to awareness and looking at it and saying, what am I afraid of? I'm afraid of a dark thought. So that means what we're doing is identifying with that dark thought. I am that. I'm bad. I am that. And so that's not a fun neighborhood to hang out in, as Annie Lamott says. My mind is like a bad neighborhood, something I gotta move out of, whatever. I can't remember the quote, but it's really great. And then one of the other antidotes that I know, Chris, that you know this quite well, that Ram Dass has talked about in particular, is embracing those dark thoughts, embracing thoughts with love, which is basically loving yourself. It's okay, I'm human. It's okay, I can have those thoughts. That's not who I am. So, examination, self-inquiry, that part of Jnana Yoga is very effective part of mindfulness. And so I highly recommend, more pursuit of that. We should talk about that a little bit more. And I think it gets fleshed out a little bit later in the course. Here's another question around practice, which this is great because it applies. With meditation, is it important to stick to one mantra or method always, or is it okay to switch around? My immediate notion, I think about what do I do, and that's the only way I can give any kind of idea of through my own experience. I do use different meditation practices, but primarily I do use Vipassana meditation. I also use guru meditation. I also use mantra meditation. I also use mala meditation. I'm using a mala with a mantra. So I do all of it, but primarily to get certainly the initial part of what I do is around becoming one-pointed. Because until that happens, it's very difficult to practice anything. Through the Ram Dass talks about it. I keep quoting him because I do these Ram Dass podcasts every 2 weeks, for years. Okay, so I have all this stuff in my head. A lot of it's useful though. Ram Dass talks about how he went and did this long Buddhist Vipassana meditation course in Burma. And then he found the great part of it was how he could really focus in on bhakti, on opening his heart through that one-pointed concentration that he had developed. So that is my main thing, because that's the easiest way for me to get as focused, get one-pointed as quickly as possible. And then I use these other practices that I've mentioned. So yeah, I think it's all fine. There are strict people who say just do one mantra and one, but Maharaji, he didn't tell us any of this. He said, are you going to the course, which was the Vipassana course? We go, yes, Maharaji, we're going. He says, Bahut acha, jao, go. We do the course, we come back, we sit around him. I remember I came back with 3-4 of us, just did, 2 weeks of, intense 10-hour-a-day meditation. he said, "You went to the course?" "Yeah." "Well, show us what you learned." So we sat up, closed our eyes, and acted like we were meditators. Within 10 seconds, we heard his high-pitched giggle. "Hey, they're meditating." He's with all these Indian people, and they all laughed at us, and that was our experience of that. So it was more about being it than anything else. On the other hand, this was a very important practice that all of us did. And so I feel, and you have people like Sharon Salzberg and Jack Kornfield and Joseph Goldstein. They're pretty good examples of what can happen if you really devote yourself to one thing, okay? So both things are true. Have I gone on too much about that, Rachel?
Nope.
Okay. We have a few more minutes. Where was this? So here's a well, there's that question. I think it's important. It's for people dealing with addiction issues. This is from Dominique. What daily practice from the Bhakti tradition would you recommend to help them in their recovery? So I was thinking about that because we got that email earlier. And, you know, if we talk about addiction, and all of us have some addiction, okay? It could be that, you know, a little piece of chocolate. If you do it every day, it might be an addiction. You know, addiction to worry. I mean, there's always something that we're involved with because we're not fulfilled. And when we're not fulfilled, we do things to fill where we're not fulfilled. So if you can, and so for me, in my case, of course, it would be, I love to chant. So the more I do that, the more I fulfill, and the less I'll eat banana cake, which I love. So I think that's one as far as bhakti, but it could be any of these paths. Whatever path might fulfill you is a good step along the way to deal with your addictions. Now when we're talking about, say, alcohol addiction, you know, that's a different level of it. And I would say then, I'm not in any way, of course, involved in addiction recovery. I have talked to, you know, people like Noah Levine and so on, and he's a terrific resource, and I think it's an important step to take advantage of a resource like that, and I think in a group situation really supports that. But the top of my list around this particular subject is mindfulness. I mean, really delving into mindfulness so that you have a moment-to-moment awareness of the impulses. And if you can get that in Technicolor in those moments, then that starts to perhaps be like a sandpaper that wears away at the impulse to take that action to fill a void. So I think mindfulness is super important. And like I say, as far as bhakti is concerned, you know, in my case, it would be chanting. And I think that would be really helpful. Let's see, time for one more. How about that?
From David, in your text.
Okay, on my text. David Burrows. David, when the mind becomes obsessed, and sometimes the body senses, how do you let go if it is gripping one? The body senses. Not quite sure what that means, but certainly mind becoming obsessed, we all understand that. And it having a grip on you. Well, it's very similar to what I just talked about when we talk about that other question about just the dramatic moments that happen. What do you do? How are you able to maintain a witness, or how, in this case, mind becomes upset? So how do we leverage out of that that really tough chain, like we're chained to a stake of suffering? And I'll say the same thing. I think that if you're in this really pernicious grip of your mind, and it's running away with you for whatever reason, there's the breath. That's the most natural thing that stops any moment, because when you have to breathe, your whole focus is on taking a breath and letting it out and feeling it, feeling going in and feeling it coming out. So the instant you can, that pulls yourself away from mind and emotions. So that is absolutely, to me, the most efficacious way to cut that chain. And I think then, like the rest of what I said, the pause practice, which I talked to, you can look up on the Heart Mind app, or Rachel, maybe you'll put that up on the Facebook group.
I will.
We'll put that up so people have access to that. That will absolutely create space. And through that space, you'll also realize the kind of thing that we've talked about also, about being able to embrace these thoughts rather than push them away, because pushing them away just makes them stronger, and identifying with them. So it's more a matter of, it's Jack Kornfield talks about it. I love his talk around being human, and it's okay. We have to tell ourselves it's okay. And later on in the month, there'll be some amazing chats around compassion and being compassionate to yourself. And that's a key for all of these questions that we've been addressing here tonight around identity and perspective and being caught in your mind and all of it. That's why we have this course going out over 30 days, each day being these wonderful nuggets of wisdom that can hopefully propel your day to a deeper understanding of yourself in every which way, and prompt practice and so on. And as we go along, and I think as you'll find in the end, there is a wonderful fabric that's woven around this concept of life and balance. So you have one more question? Okay, she had one more question. I was diagnosed with a sensory integration disorder, Asperger's. So my body is almost always uncomfortable. Any advice for chronic pain or discomfort? That's a very difficult thing to advise, because you're talking about a medical condition as well. But I'm quite familiar with, I've had my own difficulties the last couple of years that have led me to have to deal with pain. And, and saying the same things I've been saying about being able to breathe into it, I mean, that's all super important stuff. At the same time, I was using, a lot of Advil, okay, and worried about that, about the amount I was using, a lot of herbs. I was doing everything I could to deal with it on a medical basis. And then I mean, I use the practices that I know, and particularly the breath practice with pain. And when I can find the moment through using a mala, for me, I have this mala that I use. I've always got it with me, and I have you know, just Ram, Sita Ram, Shri Ram, doesn't matter what you do. But it takes you out of the identification with that which is a body suffering. And I mean, the best, here we go again with Ram Dass, but he had a stroke 20 years ago. And talk about being in pain. And I mean, it's just amazing what he deals with. And I say to him, if I have 10% of the equanimity and courage and love when I'm supposing, you know, we all end up in some way down the line with this kind of dealing with this kind of stuff, I'd be happy. So there's a way in which he's, you know, the buoyancy of his spirit is so strong that it's counterbalanced the attachment to suffering. So obviously Ram Dass is a very highly evolved being, but you know, it's real. He's human, we're human. He's suffering, we're suffering. So you have to, you know, do these things that you end up knowing can help you. The breathing meditation, whatever else, you know, to me it's a Hanuman Chalisa, which Rachel put up a beautiful version of Krishna Das's on, again, on that wonderful Facebook group, which you should all join. So thanks for hanging out here with me. I appreciate everybody and we have a lot of people who have signed up for the course. And I'm supposing we'll have a chance to watch this little webcast Q&A. There's been some great questions. So again, thank you. We look forward. Next week will be Lama Surya Das, who's a real treat, because he did 2-3 year meditations, like, you know, complete meditation retreats, doing nothing but that all day long, every day, which amounted to 6 years. Can you imagine that? And he's still got a sense of humor. But thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week and continue to take in these wonderful teachers in this course. Life in Balance. Namaste.